Good day, Royal Watchers, and welcome back to Danish News Daily. Nothing says awkward family dynamics quite like your own country wishing your mom was still in charge. And that is exactly the situation King Frederik and Queen Mary find themselves in right now. Despite being the reigning monarchs, despite doing their royal duties, despite trying their absolute hardest to win hearts and minds, the Danish public is still looking back at Queen Margarita's reign with longing eyes and saying, yeah, we preferred her, actually. That has got to sting worse than a Viking battle wound. If you want to know why the Danes are experiencing serious buyer's remorse with their new king and queen, hit that subscribe button and smash that notification bell, because this is about to get uncomfortable. Let us start with the elephant in the room, shall we? Queen Margarita abdicated in January 2024 after an absolutely legendary 52-year reign. 52 years! That's longer than most people's entire careers. She was beloved, respected, considered one of the most successful monarchs in Danish history. She was an artist, a translator, she designed her own costumes, she smoked cigarettes like a boss, and she did not care what anyone thought about it. The woman was an icon. And then she shocked the entire nation by announcing she was stepping down, handing the crown to Frederik. At the time, people thought, okay, fresh start, new generation, this will be exciting. Except nobody anticipated what came next. Here's the brutal truth. Frederik's reign got off to possibly the worst start imaginable. Just months before his mother abdicated, those Madrid photos surfaced, and suddenly the crown prince was embroiled in a scandal that made international headlines. So when he became king in January 2024, he was not stepping into the role with a clean slate and public goodwill. He was stepping into it with suspicion, judgment, and a whole lot of awkward questions hanging over his head. It's like getting promoted to CEO right after being caught doing something dodgy at the office Christmas party. Not exactly the triumphant beginning you want. And Queen Mary? Poor Mary has tried so incredibly hard to be the perfect queen. She's done everything right. She learned Danish, she embraced the culture, she does her charity work flawlessly, she dresses impeccably, and she has maintained her dignity through an absolute nightmare scenario. But here's the problem. No matter how brilliant she is forever linked to that Madrid scandal. People look at her and feel sorry for her, which is not the same as respecting her as a strong monarch. She has become the sympathetic figure rather than the powerful queen, and that is largely because of her husband's actions. It's incredibly unfair, but that is the reality she's living with. Meanwhile, Queen Margarita is sitting in retirement looking absolutely fabulous, and people are remembering her reign through rose-tinted glasses. She never had a scandal like this. She never embarrassed Denmark on the international stage. She never gave people reason to question her judgment or her commitment to duty. Sure, she had her controversial moments, like stripping Joachim's children of their titles with barely any notice, but even that drama pales in comparison to the Madrid situation. Margarita's worst moment doesn't come close to touching Frederik's worst moment, and the Danish public knows it. There's also something to be said about timing and generational change. Margarita represented stability, tradition, and a connection to Denmark's past. She was a constant presence for over 5 decades, and people grew up with her as their queen. That kind of familiarity breeds affection and trust. Frederik and Mary, on the other hand, represent change and uncertainty, and they arrived on the throne at a moment when Denmark was already feeling unsettled by the scandal. They're trying to establish themselves whilst simultaneously dealing with a crisis, and that is nearly impossible to do successfully. Royal commentators have noticed this preference shift, and some have been quite blunt about it. The Danish people are experiencing what you might call abdication regret. They supported Margarita's decision to step down at the time, thinking it was the right move for a modern monarchy. But now, with Frederik's reputation in tatters and the Madrid scandal refusing to die, people are wondering if maybe Margarita should have stayed on the throne a bit longer. Maybe until Frederik sorted out his personal life. Maybe until the scandal truly faded. Maybe indefinitely. That is not just awkward for Frederik and Mary, that's absolutely devastating for their legitimacy as monarchs. Let us talk numbers and public sentiment for a moment. Whilst there are not constant approval rating polls for the Danish royals like there are for politicians, the general vibe from media coverage and public discourse is pretty clear. People respected Margarita. They admired her strength, her intellect, her artistic talents, and her dedication to duty. When people talk about Frederik and Mary, the conversation is completely different. It's all about the scandal, the drama, the questions about their marriage, and whether they can restore dignity to the monarchy. That's not the conversation you want people having about your reign. You want them talking about your accomplishments, not your controversies. There's also the issue of how Margarita handled her abdication versus how Frederik has handled his scandal. Margarita was transparent, direct, and decisive. She announced her abdication, explained her reasoning, and executed the transition smoothly. Frederik, by contrast, has been evasive, silent, and seemingly hoping the scandal will magically disappear if he just ignores it long enough. The difference in leadership style is stark, and people notice. They remember how Margarita would have handled a crisis, and they compare it to how Frederik is fumbling through his, and Margarita wins that comparison every single time. And here's perhaps the most uncomfortable aspect of this whole situation. Some royal watchers are speculating that Margarita's abdication timing was directly related to the Madrid scandal. The theory goes that she saw the damage being done to the monarchy, realized that staying on the throne was the only way to protect the institution, but ultimately decided she had earned her retirement and it was Frederik's mess to clean up. If that theory is true, and it's purely speculation, it would mean Margarita essentially said, "Good luck fixing this disaster. I'm out." That would be simultaneously brilliant and absolutely savage. The comparison between Margarita's dignified reign and Frederik's scandal-plagued beginning is not going away anytime soon. Every time Frederik makes a public appearance, people remember what leadership looked like under Margarita. Every time Mary tries to project strength and grace, people remember that Margarita never had to try, she just was. It's an impossible standard to live up to, especially when you're starting from such a disadvantaged position. Frederik and Mary are not just competing with their own potential, they're competing with 52 years of beloved monarchy, and they are losing badly. So why does the Danish public still prefer Queen Margarita? Because she gave them stability, dignity, and pride in their monarchy. Frederik and Mary have given them scandal, embarrassment, and uncertainty. It's really that simple, folks. Thanks for watching Danish News Daily, and we'll see you in the next one.